Hi, welcome to Godshots with Darlene Sperlaza and myself, Lydia Cornell. We have an amazing show today with an award-winning recovery expert and author, Lisa Boucher. She says, transformative experiences come on the heels of crises. Isn't that the truth? Author and speaker Lisa Boucher has devoted the last several decades helping women recover from alcoholism. Lisa is the author of Raising the Bottom, Making Mindful Choices in a Drinking Culture, an award-winning book that won the 2017 Best Book Award in the category of Women's Health and placed as a finalist in the category of Addiction Recovery. She also has an upcoming book about surrender, which I'll let her tell you about. After short stints where she trained polo horses, worked as a flight attendant, bartender, hairdresser, she realized that the time had come to implement serious change. She gave up drinking, revamped her life, and became a registered nurse, living a life of recovery. Welcome, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And hello to Darlene again.
So excited to have you here. And I'm going to put the gallery view on. Now, Lisa, tell us how you came to believe that addiction recovery wasn't possible in hospitals. You worked as a nurse in hospitals. Right. And you found that there was some element missing, which I always say there's this spiritual element they never talk about. How did you come to that? What is your definition of God, if you believe in God?
I do.
And did you always, or did this happen after your recovery? And what was your recovery story?
Okay, so the God part, that is the biggest part of recovery. For most of us, we find a spiritual path that works for us. So I was raised Catholic. And that God, though, I think you mentioned in something that I read, Lydia, was a very punishing God. So, of course, and I know my grandmother was kind of fanatical. And so you were going to hell,
Yeah.
I remember hearing that a lot as a child. And so, fast forward to my mother was an alcoholic. And so I can never talk to anybody without bringing her in because she's such a huge part of why I had such a high bottom. And had I not witnessed, I don't think my mother drew a sober breath until I was 21. So that's when she got sober. So my entire life, and her addiction started out with Valium, which was the big pharma's first $1 billion drug. And that's with the B. So that's how it started. She also was a registered nurse. She got the prescription from a doctor. She's got this Italian husband who was not all that helpful, 4 kids. And I need something. So that's how her addiction started, but it took her hard and fast. So it was the pills and the, passing out and the car wrecks. From the time we were just little, I don't ever remember our home not being completely chaotic. So she gets sober. I'm in my 20s, like I said. By then the whole God thing, I do remember moving out 2 days after I graduated high school, and I went to Columbus, and I actually started going to church then, but then I drifted away again. And so when I got sober, I had a very circuitous route back to the Christian God of my childhood, but it took almost a decade because when I first got sober, I think I was very angry at God. I used to make Santa Claus lists, right? I want this and I want this, and I never got any of it. And so I'm like, well, he doesn't love me. He doesn't care. I had this very childish, immature concept of God. He was either going to grant my wishes or he's punishing. And there was just it was a very small box that I had put him or her or whatever in. So I spent a lot of time in New Age bookstores and crystals and tarot cards and that whole thing and psychics, and I'm searching and I'm reading about Buddhism and I found my way back to, I happen to still love the Catholic Church. I like all the angels and saints. I like the statues and the candles and, but even now I church hop. I have twin boys and they went to Catholic school and then they went to Catholic high school, and neither one of them are choosing, like my one son, I have 2 granddaughters now, super cute little babies, and they're not choosing to raised them Catholic so far. And that's kind of stinging, but they've gravitated more to the larger Christian, non-denominational, which is fine. I said, your job, in my opinion, as a parent, you have to teach your child God. And I don't think it matters what form that is in, whether it's Judaism, whatever, but we need to give our young people something to grab onto that's bigger than them, that, I find a lot of comfort in like angels and that kind of stuff. And so I start that helped me. And I think we're missing that. I do believe in, especially on Twitter, I mean, there's so much anxiety and depression and all this. And I really think if people would get more into the angels and things like that, because they are God's helpers to help us. And, I was calling on the angels earlier because my kids were watching our son and daughter-in-law went to go meet the new niece. They hadn't met my other son's new daughter. So we're watching the 110-pound Bernese Mountain Dog. And the kids rolled into the door and they're like, oh, we forgot the cage. Because at night, you got to crate this dog. He can't be run. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. So I had to go to the pet store and buy a big cage and then trying to get it up. And my husband was, and I'm like, come on, angels, because sometimes his coping skills, And I'm like, okay, let's just calm down. And, it all worked out and it's all good. But, we need that in our lives, I believe, and I know I do. And so that's kind of where I am now spiritually, back with the God of my understanding, Christian God, Jesus. That is who I believe in. And so that's where, my addiction, but that was a long couple decades to really get back there. Like I said, I was sober 10 years before I really got back to it. And then I did some other things, like I was doing a recovery Bible study with a man. He has since passed on, but it was at a Baptist church, and he had spent 20 years in the pen. And he had a level of spirituality that I have never seen. And really I have found some really spirituality that is so deep and so layered from people. This man knew the Bible. I don't think he made it out of 8th grade. Okay. But his knowledge of the Bible was stunning. I mean, stunning. And he could like pull passages and just peel them apart. And it was so interesting. And I did that for like a year, and that helped me. So, I did all these things trying to find my way because I was lost, not only with the drinking, but I was lost. And
what was your first, and Darlene, I'd love you to ask a question too. What was your first practical application of the tool of surrender, that first time you had to stop drinking? I mean, how did that happen? I had a mystical experience that I still am trying to explain to people who don't want to accept the concept of God. And they keep throwing in the fear and punishing version. And I keep trying to say, expand your definition to include infinite love, to imagine the infinite love in the universe that's caring for all of us.
Right. Like I said, I had this high bottom. So I can't say I had a spiritual experience that helped me to quit drinking. It was a matter of watching what happened to my mother hit this extremely low bottom. And her story is in the book, by the way. So that was kind of a little God story, how that ended up there, because she had passed. She was on several years before I started writing the book. And because this is my 5th book, and she would say, I was writing fiction, and she would say, why don't you write about alcoholism? Why don't you write about women? And I said, Mom, there's so many legs to that stool. I really didn't know what area I wanted to focus on. And she passed. And about a year or so or two later, I get this whole thing like raising the bottom. We don't have to hit these low bottoms, because my bottom was pretty much when I knew let's see, my emotions were up and down like a roller coaster. And that's really not who I am. I'm pretty even keeled. So I knew something, we didn't have kids yet. My husband's a lawyer. And so he was trying to build a practice. Had that lifestyle of like work in the day and then go out to dinner and, drinks and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of how it was. But the drinking was really escalating for me, but I still wasn't a daily drinker by the time I got sober.
Wow.
And yeah, so I didn't drink in the morning, but then I kind of did, like there were a few instances where my mom, when we were living in Dallas, she must have heard the cans popping, the beer cans, and it was like 10 in the morning and I'm painting my nails. And so she thought that was a little weird. So she started chirping in my ear because she's sober by now. She's about 7 years sober. She had this very devastating bottom. And she got sober when she was like 48. So she was much older. But so, that happened and we moved back. And that's when my drinking really, because, being a flight attendant and living this, I got a lot of chaos from the job, the irregular sleeping, eating, the people you're meeting. So when we moved back to Dayton and I went back to a marketing job and now I'm 9 to 5 and I'm doing a normal life and I can't handle it. It feels so abnormal to me, this 9 to 5, come home, cook dinner. I didn't even know, like, what do people do? Because I was always going to the bar. And so that's when it really started to escalate. And then at lunch, I started to drink and I had this little bar. And so I had an experience where I went over, I used to go at lunch and have just a couple. And then that, of course, turned into 3. And then you're pretty much swallowed by the time you come back. And then I'd shut my office door. But I'm furiously pulling on this bar door and it's closed, but it's like during the week. And I'm like, that panic. Oh. And that really struck me as odd. Like I'm overreacting, like I'm furiously pulling this door and I look at my watch and it's 10 a.m. Yeah. And that really scared me because I'm like craving a drink.
Oh my God.
I never had a craving before. Yeah. So I was like, ugh. But that was 2 years before I quit drinking, but that planted a seed for me. And then, my husband said something about like, I think you have emotional problems because you're all over. And I knew it wasn't emotional. I knew it was the alcohol because I just couldn't predict how I would act. I was either crying, laughing, raging, some intense emotion. And it was just getting very chaotic.
I can't believe I actually said, oh my God, because I had a Coke dealer for a couple of years and he said, you're an alcoholic. And I went, you're telling me now? So now I'm looking at you going, that's not so abnormal, saying 10 a.m., let me in the bar.
Right.
Is it, Darlene?
Well, for a lot of people, maybe not, but for me, and especially I'm at work. So that's kind of, not something you should be doing. So that kind of planted a seed. And then I ended up losing that job, got fired. Could you imagine that? For arguing and fighting and whatnot. And, with the boss. And then I made up this thing. I said, okay, I will know. And this was like I said, a couple years later, but I said, I'll know I have a drinking problem if there were 3 things, and I can only remember 2 of them. If I get drunk when I don't mean to. And that happened like boom, 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 3 days in a row. This all happened within a week. And then the other one, there was this little story where when my husband's brother died, we had this little Honda motorcycle. And I was driving this motorcycle. I put a Coors Light in each pocket and I'm driving on this motorcycle all over the neighborhood drinking. And I'm going through the beer drive-through, and I'm buying like a single one. So after, I guess I'd been doing this for quite a while, and the guy at the beer drive-through was like, lady, why don't you just buy a 12-pack? And I was so insulted. And I'm like, oh my God, I would never drink that much. I go home and the beer cans are like cascading out of this wastebasket. And that was the first time I saw it. Like I was in shock because I used to be a very clean drinker. Like you drink wine and throw it away. So there was never this big, and then you can just I guess, lie to yourself about how many you had. And so I saw it. And then there was one other thing. So that's when I knew, like, okay. So I remember I called my mom and I'm like, I need to come home. I mean, it was just like that. I just knew that that is what I needed to do. And I was very angry. I didn't want to. And so I started going to meetings. Well, when I got to Youngstown, she had all her women friends, as you can imagine. So the house is buzzing, right, with all these women. And I was going to stay a couple of weeks. I stayed a week and I was like, I don't live here. I need to go back to Dayton and try to figure this out where I live. And I did. And I stayed sober 3 months, going to meeting just about every day. And then I relapsed for a day. Mm-hmm. And I think I know what I did wrong. I didn't do anything. I just kind of showed up, compared myself out of the room, because I got sober in 89. And it really was mostly older men who had drank long and hard. And I really couldn't relate. And so it was difficult. And then I finally, I guess I found meetings or something where women, and I started to see some, but there weren't as many. I mean, there's just scads of them now, but it just made me feel a little bit better about it. I mean, yeah, the people have gotten younger in the rooms, which is a beautiful thing. And
out here in LA, you see movie stars in every meeting and rock stars.
I bet, because it's just a ubiquitous problem. And, the shame in our culture, we have this problem. And then our culture, like, especially as a nurse, we need to touch on that, because there's some information that people need to have. But it's just so hard to go out, right, without, if you're diabetic and you pass up a cupcake, people don't say, why aren't you eating that cupcake? Why aren't you eating those cookies?
Exactly.
But you don't want to drink and you get questions, not always, and that's very uncomfortable. Like, for those of us, I know, Lydia, you said you've been sober 27 years and Darlene, I think 16. So by now you learn how to manage all that. 18, is it, Darlene?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who's counting, right? Who's counting?
Well, those, we're in long-term recovery, so it's not hard to go to parties and avoid it. Yeah. But when you're a week or two or a month, it's a big deal. And that can
sometimes it can be. Sometimes it can be difficult. I think that's why people with time relapse. Because you know what? I always say, if you unzip the program and don't do the steps and do what you're supposed to do, there's people relapsing at any age. We have one day at a time,
That is true.
But I do want to back up, because I want to say something to you, Lisa. And Lydia already knows this, but I'm a nurse practitioner. Okay. And when you were talking about the nurse part of it, and what I see is sadly missing is the spiritual part. The part that Florence Nightingale really started out with. We've lost that due to the pace and the insurances and the acuity that we're taking care of now and different things. But, when you were speaking about nursing, it's like I did my doctorate at the University of Alabama, and it was on spirituality. And I did that with lipids, with a lipid profile. So cool. And it really, their numbers changed. I'll just briefly touch on it again, because I've talked about it before on here. But I wanted to prove that prayer could reduce a lipid panel without any other intervention. And the University of Alabama took that on. And so I basically used prayer, and we added a new prayer each week. And we did this program for 12 weeks. And at the end of the day, when the statistical numbers was completed, the LDL was down, the HDL was up, and the cholesterol was down, which is exactly what you get with a statin drug. And
So let me interrupt you. So did you pray for a certain group and then have another group that?
No, they had to individually pray. It was prayer that they took. They did something they never prayed. And we knew all of this from the lab draws, and we did a Likert style test. And so it was a very interesting study. And, we see miracles all the time in the medical field. And I don't think people correlate that. But there's spirituality that we need to be bringing, because that's what we basically learn. When we get into recovery, we're basically learning, as you said, to refine our higher power, to redefine the universe. What does that mean to us? And, you talked about Catholicism, and that's where I have landed also, but that was a long journey to get me there through many different denominations. And what I have found is the word Catholic simply means universal. And if you go to the lectionary and you take a look at that, that is worldwide. Any church worldly will be teaching the same thing on a Sunday, because that's what the lectionary is about. So the whole spiritual journey, people don't really get taught this. This is not something they teach us in school, so we learn it. And I think becoming sober and in recovery, as you're saying, really helps us to get our footing together,
Absolutely. Well, as far as I worked in the emergency room for a number of years in a level 1 trauma center, and then I worked in psych. And what I've seen, though, even I still work a couple days a week. I'm in utilization review, though, now. I kind of wanted to keep my foot, and so it was relevant. So I still know what's going on, kind of thing. But I don't know, Darlene, I'm very disappointed at the psychiatrists, and especially for people, because they just throw pills at them.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 people that come through the psych ward doors have underlying substance abuse. They don't address it in a meaningful way. They throw antipsychotics on people that are not really psychotic. And it's just disgusting to me, because the same thing that happened to my mother, that's what happened to her. I mean, so she has this Valium addiction that's making her completely loopy and just about unable to function. And then they're throwing Thorazine, lithium. They're saying she's manic depressive, it was ridiculous. And my mother literally could not function. Mm-hmm. And so when she broke her neck falling down the steps, and finally found a doctor then she went to rehab, because she'd been in the psych ward, and it was just horrible for her. And I think my dad was taking her to Cleveland Clinic and all these psychologists, and nobody said, you're an alcoholic, you have substance abuse, let's get you to not one in 25 years. How is that possible?
And but see, what?
It's still happening. It's still happening.
What, Lisa, I think that's where Lydia comes into the picture very, very just smoothly, because we have that medical background and she does not. But what she did know was we needed something to counter this world effect right now. What's going on? Exactly what you're talking about. And so Lydia and I got together. It was Godshots. And it's like, how do you counter the darkness with light?
Oh, and, I love that.
I'm on the East Coast. I'm back when you talked about Youngstown. I'm about 45 minutes from Youngstown, Ohio, is where I live.
Where do you live?
I live in Weirton, West Virginia.
Okay. That's right. She did say West Virginia. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. And so when you said Youngstown, I thought, you know what? It's weird that we're all connecting, because when I met Lydia, here she is West Coast, I'm East Coast. And it's like, we come into and we were brought together through the word Godshots.
We met the weirdest way. One day.
How did you guys meet?
Well, she decided to have her attorney send me a letter.
Okay.
Oh, it's so embarrassing. I trademarked the term Godshots years ago. Diane Cannon, the movie star, told me to trademark it. She goes, because I use it all the time when I heard it in recovery, and I went, we should talk about Godshots more. And I trademarked it, thinking I could make it a nonprofit for everyone to get involved. And then my attorney at the time got mad because he saw Darlene. He was the one who saw that you had been using it. And he wrote you a letter, cease and desist letter. And
I have a beautiful Godshot website, beautiful, because I was having Godshots and didn't know what to do with them.
We're all having all the time. And then so I called her, we talked on the phone. I said, why don't we just join forces? Because it's something we can give away. It's not
awesome. I love that.
Yeah, but here's the best part, Lisa. So she calls me up and, like I got my phone and I'm talking to her and she's like, well, why didn't you get back to me? So I don't have any idea who she is, right? Now I'm busy. I'm working. I'm a nurse. I got things to do. I don't have time to listen to you tell me take down this website that I've worked really hard to put up. But I'm being polite because she's got it trademarked. So then she says to me, she goes, I got to go. She goes, can we make a plan to talk next week? And she tells me her name's Lydia Cornell. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. So we hang up and I Googled her. I'm like, who is this person? And I see her bent over with her hands in concrete and I'm going, uh-oh. Who this is. And so never in a million years did I mean, she is the most beautiful person inside and out.
Yes.
And our relationship is amazing. And I told her, we were just talking about this. I said, there's no other explanation for us being together except God. There is none.
Right, right. Well, I love how you couched that we need something to overcome the darkness of that. And that really is a great way to put it, because I feel like in the healthcare right now, there's a lot of darkness. And I'm not seeing these people get well. What I'm seeing is them leave and come back and come back and come back. And it's like this revolving door. And so many of them, and let's not forget, a lot of these men and women especially, they have kids at home, like I was, when my mother was revolving through psych wards because these doctors didn't know what they were doing. I think it's criminal what they did to her. For 25 years, she was chemically, and once she got sober, she never took another pill except for blood pressure.
Wow.
But not crazy. She was not depressed.
But see, that's the key to our disease. That's the tricky part. Whenever we say this disease is cunning, baffling, powerful, that's the very tricky part, because when we go in to be seen by a practitioner of any sort, you can really look like you're bipolar. You're depressed, anxiety.
Absolutely.
You can have all of those things. And for somebody that's uneducated in this field, really, and I mean, and you know what? I have read a bazillion books on, I'm a nurse practitioner, a bazillion medical books. Nothing can prepare you like actually walking in the trenches. And so I believe we're very powerful women sitting on this screen that have actually walked through that fire, and we can actually look at people and help them.
Well, that is true, because they're not getting the help they need. And these doctors, there's a lot of hubris, and a lot of the doctors, they have no appetite to learn. They're not interested in addiction, and they just think throwing a pill.
I don't know why.
It's big pharma. It's big pharma. That's why.
Yeah. No, but it's also because they think this AA thing or 12-step programs are an airy-fairy kind of, what is spirituality? I want to bring it to practical application. When I always start with, Einstein said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And we have countless Godshots, and I'll tell you a couple of them that you talked about. When you're in a bar, what do? But these matchups, these bizarre, uncanny glimpses of this peaceful serenity or this higher power, doesn't have to be couched in religion. We can open the door to people who are afraid of religion and make it more scientific, the way you're doing with the experiments with the lipids. I want to pinch myself. I had to pinch myself to believe these miracles happen to me. And I want to unwind it back and figure out, because I wasn't from a very religious background, I'm going to wind it back and prove it. I want to prove God through science, because science, God is love. It's universal love. And that's kind of what the program is all about. It's sharing your experience, strength, and hope, and helping each other. It's not airy-fairy. It's not hard to understand or some esoteric theory.
And I do want to just rewind. You said wind it back. I want to rewind to something that you said, Lisa, early on in your conversation, when you were talking about the gentleman that you did the Bible study with, I believe, that had been in prison.
Yeah.
And, doing a lot, either as being a practitioner or being in recovery, I've been into jails and I've talked to people and I've done that type of thing as service, right? And the most profound thing I ever heard from a man, and this is for all of our listeners, for whatever you're going through, just hear this statement because it's profound. He looked at me, and here he is incarcerated for life for murder, right? And I'm not afraid to be talking to him because all of us on this screen know, right? And he looked at me and he goes, "You are one choice away from being me."
Yeah.
How strong is that?
Yeah.
So for anybody listening, that's true. Every choice we make is going to be our next building block, either for good or for bad, right? And all I can tell you from my life 18 years ago, because I will have 18 years on Sunday.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But so that type of thing right there, I was making very poor choices and didn't even know I was making them. right? And so once you have recovery, you have at least an option to try to make better decisions, because we're all going to fail. We're human. That's the human side of us.
Well, I think somebody has like said 80% of the people in prisons, drugs or alcohol is,
Exactly.
some were probably in blackouts and don't even know what they did.
89% of all crime is drug and alcohol related, or even higher, actually.
Right.
And think they need help on that level, not with drugs. But what do you call surrender? Your new book coming out is called?
It's called Pray, Trust, Ride, Lessons on Surrender from a Cowgirl and a King.
Oh, wow. See, what is the alchemy? What is the magic? See, I have to say this one thing. When I surrendered that first day, a transformation came upon me that was so tremendous. I started crying, a river of tears, 20 years of hell lifted off my shoulders. And then I never craved a drink from that moment, that one surrender. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that you don't have to, if you could take the simple step of letting go. How do you let go of your worries and fears? We need to help and lift up people that are really suffering in all walks of life, especially young people who have no grasp of spirituality. What is the concept of surrender? How do you do it?
Oh, Lydia, that is a loaded question. That's a tough question because I think it's really different for everybody. And I do think it's impossible to surrender as long as you're living in pride and ego. Those two things will block surrender, right? So that's why for most people, they have to get so beaten down until they say, okay, God, I get, and a lot of us, let's face it, we're strong-willed, we are very capable people. Most of us are really bright, like they say in the big book, but I have found that to be true. There's a lot of intelligence. And so, I don't remember ever saying, I'm going to beat this. I don't remember that, but it's just that surrendering to like, I can't do this. My biggest surrender moment was in my marriage. And I want to share this little story. So we're married 4 years. I get sober. Then immediately I'm pregnant with twins. And then, I have these twins. And then they're 6 months old and I go to nursing school. And my husband's furious. He thinks, in his twisted thinking, oh, you don't want to be a mother, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, I had the realization of, okay, if this marriage doesn't work, I really need to be able to put food on the table for my children. Because I'd been in and out of college for a decade and hadn't finished my degree. Even though I was entirely capable, my drinking impeded any progress, So I decided I need a mom job. That's kind of why I picked it, not, I just wanted something that was going to be flexible. And so I said, I'm going to and that's what I did. And it was the most difficult years because I was very focused with my life was a very small world, recovery, school, and the grocery store, and my babies. And that was my world for 3 years. And our marriage was falling apart rapidly. And we get through all that, and he was going to move out, all this stuff. And, some people saying, well, you should go counseling. I'm thinking, no, I don't want to do any of it. And I remember standing in my kitchen. I said, God, if you want this to work, you are going to have to fix it. Mm-hmm. I'm done. I'm not doing counseling. I'm not doing anything. And I felt this weight, like you were talking about, Lydia, where you have these moments where you just feel like this weight fall off. And I knew I'd really surrendered because I wasn't attached to the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care. And I think we can never surrender as long as we're attaching ourselves to a specific outcome.
Oh my God, exactly. That's control. We can't control.
Right.
Yeah.
I let it go. And I thought, Lord, either you want it to work and it'll work, or I'll end up divorced, but I'll wait till I graduate nursing school and, and it'll be what it'll be. And here we are 37 years later, it worked, and we did nothing to make it work. We didn't really work at it. We just let it go.
Oh my God.
School, and my kids were thriving, because for a while they were getting really clingy because of the fighting and the chaos, how that goes. And so it's just, that was my biggest surrender, more so than with the drinking, because, I think we get sober But now we have to live in this. And that's the hardest part. Stopping drinking was the easiest part, really. It was the living without the drink that is the challenge, right? I mean, so that was a big surrender moment, to not turn back to the alcohol to cope, to not live in fear of what's going to happen. Oh my gosh, because you can project, and I can still do that. But, I really surrendered. And I had so many other things to focus on that I didn't keep taking it back like I do with a lot of other things.
Right.
So I really gave it to God and I let it go. And I just kind of went on about my life and didn't even really care. Like, there was no weeping and gnashing. There was none of that. In fact, he was getting upset and said, well, he was going to move out. And then he brought divorce papers home that he had drawn up. And I'm reading them going, this is absolutely ridiculous. How are you going to live? I mean, it was so ridiculous. He was being really generous. I'm like, well, you're being a fool. So I just ripped those up. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So, it was.
I know that if you come from love and service in your heart, like whenever I do public speaking, I go, get my ego out of the way. Help me be of love and service to whoever's in the room. And and in that case, with your letting go, you would hit your bottom with that at that moment.
Right.
You knew you loved him enough to not let him take give you all his money, which is interesting, right?
Right. You're just like, you got to be realistic too, right? That what's going to be workable in the long run and kind of things. So I don't know, those things, that was a really big pivotal surrender. And I do remember too, I was kind of baiting him because I wanted to go to Lourdes, where the Blessed Mother had appeared to the peasant children in the spring. So I did go there and I did get a spiritual healing, because I remember saying, and it was kind of, I guess it was a little, I was baiting him a bit, because I was thinking to myself, say one word about me going, and this is going to be it. So I remember saying, I'm going to go to France. I want to go to Lourdes, and I need you to do the kids.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't say one word. And I went and I came back with strength, and I had miracles there. And there's lots of little stories about what happened in Lourdes. But I think it gave me the courage and the strength to keep going in a situation that was less than ideal at the time, until it all kind of worked it out. And I know when I was first sober too, probably after that one day relapse, I had a very beautiful spiritual dream of Jesus on the cross. And I knew then I was on the right path for me. That was kind of like my spiritual, that I'm like, okay, this is where God wants me.
Beautiful.
Sober.
Oh my gosh.
Sober and be a sober mother to my boys, and they've never seen me drink. They're 32 now. So
it's awesome.
My son's never seen me drink, but the first 6 months I drank with him, driving him in the car when he was a little baby.
Scary, isn't it? The things, and then you look back and you realize how badly it really hijacks that prefrontal cortex, the alcohol test, because it just shuts down all that higher reasoning. And, we do things that we would never have done.
How do you tell people to stay sober daily? I mean, I still am. I have to pinch myself to believe I'm still 27 years. I've never craved a drink since that first day. That's weird. I do have a daily reprieve, and I do pray every day. I do surrender every day. I do the 3rd step and the 7th step prayer. But there are times life gets really weird and I squirrel cage. But that's the one thing I won't do. How does that happen?
You have like habits, those habits of a morning program and that. And I tell people that are struggling, like you all probably do too, that one day at a time concept really is magical. Because I was very, like I said, having a higher bottom. Nobody told me I had to quit drinking. Nobody told me I had to go to AA. So it was all just, I'm deciding. And so it was very, very difficult to accept that I was an alcoholic, because I kept going, but I don't drink every day. So I'm going to these meetings and, I'm not hiding booze in my closet. And I was very open about it. I was never hiding alcohol. I was drinking, mostly in bars and clubs or whatnot. But so that was really hard. And it was just, that's what helped me is those women were so wise and they'd say, Lisa, just worry about today. And you're an alcoholic when you get sober in June and you're worried about New Year's Eve, because that's my birthday. And I was like obsessing about, well, what am I going to do New Year's Eve? How am I going to stay sober New Year's Eve? And they're like, it's June. Okay. It's June. Don't worry about December. And I had to literally listen to these people and pull it back to just today. And with the twins and school, and that it was about all I could handle. And, I look back and I said, wow, that was a God shot. Because as hard as it was, if it wasn't that hard and that structured, I would have probably not be here sitting here talking to you, because I realized I was so undisciplined. And, we raised ourselves. We were all running amok when we were kids because of my mom. And then my father was this rageaholic who wasn't home all that much. So I never really had structure. And then I had to build my own, and God kind of did it for me. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you these babies and I'm going to put you back in school, and, you're going to have to.
I feel like I've had onion layers peel off. Even this year, the past 3 years, I became less selfish, less greedy and ambitious. I could feel levels and levels and levels of ego being peeled away. So I can finally I'm growing my soul. It feels like it's a process. It's a journey. You don't always have it happen overnight. Those magical things happen. You have to stay in the game.
And the book talks about sunlight of the spirit. And, I really think that whenever you talked about, Lisa, what happened to you going back to school, being pregnant with twins, having twins, you didn't have any control over that. And I think that's the piece that people miss. It's like God is in control, and things happen in our lives because he's moving all of the pieces, whether we like it or don't like it. And when you talk about letting go, you made it sound like, okay, let it go. This girl, for those listening that want to know how that happened with me, I never let anything go that didn't have claw marks in it. I really didn't. It's like, no, I got to keep that. I got to have that. And, that has taken me all of these 18 years to start realizing that if it feels like God wants to move it, okay. Because when I try to hang on to it, I just muck it up. And so it's like, but no, I had claws and things, and it was really hard to let go. I used to pound on things and cry and be like, cigarettes. Let me just tell you this story. So cigarettes, I smoked when I drank, right? God gave me 5 years to continue smoking when I quit drinking, right? And so then I learned, okay, we're talking about Catholic. And so Lent, you give up things, right? So the very first year, I'm 5 years sober. I walk in, I'm like, what do you want me to give up for Lent? I'll do anything. And I heard cigarettes in my head. Well, anything but that. I'm not going to do that, right? But I'll come to church 40 days in a row for Lent. And I did. Next year, do the same thing. Third year, I get mad. I'm like, I'm tired of hearing about it. Here's me to God. I'm tired of hearing about it. I don't want to quit smoke. And there's the claws and things, right? This is what happened. So about week 3, I said, I'm not giving up anything for Lent. I don't care. I'm not doing it. I walk out and I've got the attitude. I've got the pride. I've got the ego, right? About 3 weeks into Lent, I wake up and I can't move my neck. And so go to the doc, find out I have one swollen lymph node over here, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm a nurse practitioner at this point in time. He puts me on 10 days of antibiotics. I go back, still there, right? He looks at me and he goes, okay, you're a practitioner. What's the next step? That was sobering, because I was like, we're going to do a chest x-ray. He's like, yeah, what are we looking for? I said, cancer, lung cancer. He's like, that's exactly right. I got that x-ray taken. He did it for me that morning. It was April 19th of 2009. I had gotten sober in April of 2004, right? 2009 at 9:15 a.m. I was standing in the radiology room at this office, and my legs started shaking, and I was staring at the corner of the room, and out of that corner came a voice that was firm yet loving. It was the most firm, loving voice I'd ever heard. And that voice said, I told you to quit. now quit.
Oh,
That was it. That's a God shot.
wow.
I never picked up a cigarette after that.
That's amazing.
And the doctor that was taking care of me was also my friend. And I was sobbing. And he walks in and he said, "Did you look at your x-ray?" And I said, "Nope." And he's like, "Then why are you crying? Because it's clear for now." And I said, "Because I have to quit smoking." He's like, "What?" And I never picked up another cigarette.
I love that.
And so I know that God is real. He's as real as we are talking on the screen. He can talk to you. He can. I mean, it's really amazing. It's really
That's
amazing.
a great story.
May I ask you one thing, Lisa and Darlene? How do you believe that only people who pray can get these results? In other words, aren't we all protected, or is it true that only the ones who really are praying can have the blessings of God?
Oh, no, I think God touches people all the time. I think he touches people that don't even like him, and then they are changed. Or so, no, I don't believe that at all. I think he works equally, but I think once you start to tap into that, like Darlene, that story that you just shared, had you not been tapped into God, you would have discounted that or made it something else. It could have happened to, somebody who's an atheist or whatever, still happen, but they will explain it away some other way as opposed to spiritual, because they don't want to. But you were talking earlier about science, and it is so exact. And I know I've talked to people that have found God by physics. Mm-hmm. They were when you're
quantum physics. Mm-hmm.
Quantum physics. When physics, you realize how exact everything is, like in nature, and it starts like, okay, there's a divine intelligence here that is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think God is here for everybody.
In the Bible, just let me just say this really quickly. In the Bible, it says we are all created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. We are all in God's image.
We're all God's children.
And here's the part, though. We have free will. And so if you do read the Bible and you read about the prodigal son, he's the one that walked away from God until he ended up in a pig pen with nowhere to go, no money, no food, no anything, and realized, I need to go back to my father, right? And it's the same with us. God just lets us go until we hit our bottom, whatever that bottom may be. Lisa, you're saying that you had a high bottom. In the scheme of things, when I meet people, so did I. It wasn't like I was under a bridge someplace with absolutely nothing and lost family, kids, and all that. As a matter of fact, I had everything. I had nice cars, a nice house, a nice job. I had it all. But you know what I didn't have? I was emotionally bankrupt. I was so empty. I wanted to commit suicide. How can you want to commit suicide when you've got such a great life? That makes sense. Doesn't make sense.
Well,
but that's emotional bankruptcy.
I mean, I really don't think, like we were saying earlier, the doctors, the therapists, they don't really get it if they're not in it, and we are uniquely able to help others because we get that. Like you just described what my sister is going through. And I've heard through the grapevine that she's now going to meetings, but she's married to a heart surgeon, has this big life, and she's a hot mess, and it doesn't matter. The jewelry, the cars, none of that really,
right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't make people happy. It really doesn't.
And you know what? This here, when I get on to do Godshots, no matter how busy my day has been, no matter what I've had to go through, when I sit down and I come into this room and we start discussing this, it's like, this is the good part. This is the good stuff.
What matters in life, really.
Exactly.
Because it is so hard to watch people suffer and their lives just aren't working and their kids are suffering. And it breaks my heart. It really does. But, there are those too that they don't want to give up that lifestyle of their party friends, and they're just not going to. And so I also, and as a nurse practitioner, I'm sure you see it, where these women in their 50s and 60s start to get really sick with liver problems, heart problems, from the decades of drinking, and they keep on, but they don't ever stop. And I think sometimes money is a big hindrance, because when people don't lose anything, because there's always a financial net around them, kind of like my sister. I mean, she's going to be 65, and I was kind of losing hope that she'd ever get sober, because she's had a lot of consequences with her kids being done and things like that, but not where, if she's banging her carp or whatever, they just fix the car and move on, right? And they like to
eventually your body gives out.
Well,
and
that's
that's a bad journey at that point.
It's a terrible journey, because that's exactly what happens. The body just can't take that amount of alcohol when you get in your 50s and 60s and 70s. It just can't.
Right. And that's a hard thing to watch, because little by little they're destroying vital organs.
Oh yeah.
And they become very ill.
My stepsister died of full-blown alcoholism at 49 a couple years ago, right before Chuck died, my mother's husband, my stepfather.
It's sad. It's very sad, but our culture glamorizes alcohol to a point that people are ashamed to not drink. And that's what I think we need to change, that message. Like, I know we don't ask people why they're not drinking, but I think we need to bring it out there more, that it's very cool to be sober and in control. And I talked a lot about that in my book, like, why isn't sober the new cool, and make it fun, because it is kind of cool to have all your faculties about you.
Yeah.
And not be in a vulnerable position, right, where you don't know where you are or who you're with, or, that's really dangerous. And just to be able to make healthy choices and choose fun things. I've yet to meet an alcoholic that doesn't get sober and find their gift. Like, you guys found this, or they start painting or gardening, or they start doing something creative that they didn't do before. Have you noticed that?
Yes. And
a lot of talent.
I believe God intersects humanity through creativity, through art, through appreciation. When I was taking a walk one day and I noticed all these flowers, I went crazy over the flowers and the beauty, and I started looking up. Butterflies came over. I'm not kidding. I had a mystical experience with butterflies. And I began to realize all God wants, or I call the universe, is interactive. It needs playmates. It wants to interact with us. And the minute we're grateful and we're in the present moment appreciating it, it starts to give us our dreams. And I had so many magical little gifts that day of the thing I wanted to see most in the world was a monarch butterfly. It came right over to me. Come on.
And do you know, whenever you talk about butterflies and the transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly,
yes,
and when it's in the cocoon, and how when it starts to mature and is trying to break out and it's struggling to get out of the cocoon, right? Just kind of like we struggled to get out of an addiction. Anybody that is in addiction of alcohol, they're going to have a little struggle because it's a habit, as you mentioned earlier, Lisa. But once you get out of that cocoon and out of that addiction, then your life starts to just explode with vibrance and butterflies and all of the magical things that you get to see. And I'm just grateful. Like, I'm looking at this platform now that I don't know, Lydia, I don't remember when you trademarked, but I know I started Godshots in about 2016 on my end. And so I look at the length of that, the year's preparation to be to this point, to have a platform, to have somebody beautiful like yourself, Lisa, come on here and share books and your journey and help people. This is just getting the word out there one moment at a time. Somebody, I guarantee you, I promise you, there are people listening to this show right now that are going to write in, call in, because we've touched something. And I know that because that's how God works.
All the time. Yeah. That's the God shot. The God shot is that we, as two medical practitioners here, could bring the message out to people to start waking up in the medical profession. Yes. They have to start to cross that. They have to stop prescribing drugs and not looking at the root causes and the spiritual solution, which doesn't have to be all religious. It can be first taking a step forward to appreciating the beauty of the universe. And I think the unified field is love. God is love. You can start that simply, but I can't explain how I'm sober every single day. I was a radioactive, drop down, dead drunk. I almost dropped my baby down the stairs in a blackout. And I went to one moment I surrendered and everything changed. Come on, explain this to me.
So what made you?
that's what I want to I want to investigate. This source of infinite love in the universe. Is it real? I know it's real. I've had practical experience of it. The application, the Godshots show me like breadcrumbs every day that I have a Godshot, a coincidence that's uncanny. I realize, oh my God, it's real. I'm on the right path. For breadcrumbs. And that's why, and when I don't have as many, I'm too stuck in the material world worrying. When I'm in fear, I'm in worrying about the future. When I'm in regret, I'm worrying about the past. When I'm in the present moment, that's when they start happening.
Right.
So we have to teach people to open that door, to not be afraid of the word God. Use the word good orderly direction, the acronym, or use group of drunks, or the goodness in the universe. And if we are made in God's image and God is all good, there's no opposing force except the liar, the serpent, everything else that's evil is a lie. So is disease. Don't make other gods before God. Don't put cancer above God. Don't make it.
And here's the other thing too, and Lisa, you may or may not know this, but one of the I don't know if it's just the oddities between Lydia and myself. Like, she comes from the perspective of the universe and those type of things, and I came from a background of being very Bible centered and church oriented and that kind of stuff, because that was in my history. And so I always say this to people when they ask, because, we talk about the big book in AA, which people know about. And then there's the big book, which is the Bible, which is kind of based, AA was based on that. And Bible just basically stands for basic instructions before leaving Earth. You want to know what to do? Read it. That's it. Just read it, because it's all there. And if you look at Proverbs 27, I believe, it's the one that talks about what happens to people that get drunk, because I want to make this very clear. Drinking in and of itself is nothing bad. I mean, if somebody can have a drink with dinner or with whatever and handle that, God doesn't dislike that. It's not that everybody has to quit drinking, but if you're alcoholic, that creates problems. And you end up just like the scripture talks about, you're beat up and you don't know why. You have no idea what happened to you the night before. You're becoming ill. You don't know why. Well, it's real simple. Why?
And I think it makes you operate on a very low vibration, talking about like the universe and the spirit and all that. It's a very low vibration when you're putting all that poison in your body. I don't think I think our cells are drowning, And once you get sober, you feel lighter just because you're not drowning in all that alcohol, which is
let me tell you this little story. And I mean, I was maybe sober not even a year, and I was doing a commitment of opening a building on a certain morning at like 6:30 in the morning to do an 8 a.m. meeting, right? And so I was down there and I was by myself, and this guy walks in, and he was of a foreign nationality. To this day, I don't know what he was, and I didn't ask, but he just asked me, he's like, "Can I have a cup of coffee?" And I said, "Sure." He ended up being a taxi driver. He didn't know what AA meant. He didn't even know what he was doing there. He just knew that the door was open. He wanted coffee. So we were talking for a few minutes about AA, and I was telling him what the group was going to do at 8:00. And he looked at me as he was leaving, because he got a taxi call. And he looked at me and he goes, "I'm going to keep this real simple for you." He goes, "I believe in the Holy Spirit, and I believe it lives inside of my heart." And he goes, "And if you're putting that drink in you," he goes, "then basically you're throwing water on the fire." And he just walked out. And I was like, so profound, right? It's like carried with me forever. So for me to drink is putting out the Holy Spirit in me. That is for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
So. Kills brain cells, by the way.
Yeah.
Much of it. I mean, there are normal drinkers out there,
Absolutely.
But like Darlene, kudos to him.
Here's an example of a great Godshot I heard in a meeting right when I needed to hear this the most. I always hear the right message. And I actually ask for Godshots and I hear them. It's amazing. A woman friend of mine, I'd like to have her on the show, by the way, and introduce all of you to her. She was struggling on Wall Street. She was in the Wall Street banking industry, and they all went for drinks after work every single day. And she was just newly sober, 2 weeks sober, and she was dreading being invited, but she had to go, and she was scared to not go with her crowd because it was part of her job. And just as the waitress went around the table, she ordered she ordered a drink. She accidentally, out of her mouth came, I would like a scotch. I would like a Maker's Mark. And then she felt guilty, and the waitress went all the way around the table again and came back to her and said, I'm so sorry, I forgot your drink order. And she went, oh my God, that was her gotcha.
Wow. Yeah.
She went, a Coke, a Diet Coke. It was like, and she's never had a drink since that day. And that was also 30 years ago.
That's
So saying,
yes. Wow.
Yeah, she was protected.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Very cool.
That is cool.
Lisa, I can't wait to read your new book. And I love this book about mindful choices in a drinking culture. Is that it on the piano? Is that it over there behind you on a table? The book. Yes. Can you hold it up for us? Okay. Raising the Bottom, Mindful Choices in a Drinking Culture. How to make mindful choices. Making mindful choices in it.
I think that's awesome, Lisa. Awesome.
Love you. We
Awesome.
love your message, your bio, your website. I'll post everything on the chat and in the logo under YouTube and all the places we're going to post the show. But we want to have you back to discuss your new book.
I'd love that. Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be fun.
It's been really nice meeting you, Lisa. I look forward to reading the book in its entirety because I think that's just going to be a great read. And,
well, I hope you'll share it with some of your medical professionals because there's quite a few doctors and nurses in here. I said, actually, after I read, I said, oh my God, nobody's going to want to go to the hospital. They're going to think we all need recovery because I didn't realize, but these are people that I had access to and I just knew they had great stories and were like getting back in this, mainstream of life. So so I hope you will and share it with
I absolutely will. And the next time I'm coming through Cincinnati to get down to Kentucky or Tennessee.
Yeah, holler.
You know what?
I'm in Dayton. I'm a little north of Cincinnati.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say they have beautiful riverfront restaurants in Cincinnati.
Yeah, they do. My son lives there. But I would love to.
That would be awesome. And Lydia, we'll get you out here.
Hey, I'll take a road trip. I love driving across America. I'm a road trip fanatic.
Oh, love you. Well, thank you, lady.
Thank you for coming, Lisa. It was a pleasure meeting you.
It was a pleasure meeting you both. And Lydia, such a joy to see you face to face. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you so much for being on our show. We can't wait to have you back. And we'll say goodbye for now, but we'll put the books in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.